Good morning. My name is Antoinette Scully, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Studio City. I apologize for the airplane noise. They're supposed to turn off a little farther away from us. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the vice president of the board. Thank you for deciding to spend your Sunday morning here with us. Although we're not sitting together in our beautiful brick and mortar building, we're still able to have spiritual gatherings online. We hope that this time we share with each other today will lift your spirits and increase your sense of community. 7 days a week, Unitarian Universalists live our faith by doing. Whether in community with others or as an individual, we are known that active, tangible expressions of love, justice, and peace are what make a difference. Embracing love, peace, and understanding goes beyond our individual belief systems as we are creators of positive change in people and in the world. Here at this church, we aspire to be a welcoming congregation, a place that is inclusive and welcoming to all folks who identify as LGBTQIA+. This is an ongoing process, and we're working diligently to achieve this goal. Another airplane. During the Joys and Sorrows segment of the service, you'll be asked to enter your joys and sorrows in the chat. Please label them with J or S at the beginning so the member of our congregation can read them and know exactly how to respond. If you are new or newish to our community, please stay after our service and visit with Barbara Allen from membership, or Hannah, our minister. And they would like to get to know you and tell you a little bit more about our congregation and answer any questions you might have. At the end of service, you'll be able to unmute yourself. At that time, you can chat with other folks attending the service. Here are a couple of announcements. On the 11th, which is next Sunday at 7 p.m., the welcoming congregations will be having a movie night, and we'll be showing Disclosure. Today at 12:30 will be Social Justice with Ari. And so you should have gotten a link in your email to join that. Right after service, there will be a Vote Forward email letter writing campaign, and you can just stay on for that. Also at about 11:15, right after service, you'll be able to find in the chat a link to join the Social Justice Support Group. And so lots of announcements and lots of things. Please check your emails for the e-news, and you can also check the church website for more updates and what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I have a longer than usual call to worship for you this morning by Bill Moyers from the introduction of his book of speeches called Moyers on Democracy. Our democracy has prospered most when it was firmly anchored in the idea that we, the people, not just a favored few, would identify and remedy common distempers and dilemmas, and win the gamble our forebears undertook when they espoused the radical idea that people could govern themselves wisely. Whatever and whoever tries to supplant that with notions of a wholly privatized society of competitive consumers undermines a country that, as Gordon Wood put it in his landmark book, The Radicalism of the American Revolution, discovered its greatness by creating a prosperous, free society belonging to obscure people with their workaday concerns and their pecuniary pursuits of happiness, a democracy that changed the lives of neglected and despised masses of common laboring people. I wish I could say that journalists in general are showing the same interest in uncovering the dangerous linkages thwarting this democracy. It is not for lack of honest and courageous individuals who would risk their careers to speak truth to power, a modest risk compared to those of some journalists in authoritarian countries who have been jailed or murdered for the identical crime. But our journalists are not in control of the instruments they play. It is a sacred time this and a sacred virtual space this. Let's begin our sacred time together in song with our first hymn, O Star of Truth.
O star of truth down shining through clouds of doubt and fear, I ask beneath thy guidance my pathway may appear. However long the journey, however hard it be, though I be lone and weary, lead on, I follow thee. I know thy blessed radiance can never lead astray, though ancient creed and custom may point another way, or through the untrod desert, or over trackless sea. Though I be lone and weary, lead on, I follow thee.
And now please join me in reading the words of our covenant in unison, which will be followed by the doxology, which will be followed by our time for all ages that answers the question, what is journalism? Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Hey guys, you can join in here. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. Thus do we covenant. So the inspiration for our topic this morning comes from reading this book over the summer, Surviving Autocracy by Masha Gessen, who is far and away my favorite journalist. In this work, she elucidates how we can survive autocracy and by extension save democracy, which is forefront on our minds these days. The obvious things we can do is participate in democracy by voting, by attending public meetings, by contacting our electeds when we want them to do their jobs better. But in order to do these things, we need the prerequisite information that informs our choices and the things for which we need to advocate and lobby. We get this information from quality journalism and reliable news, and that is what today's service is all about. Thank you. Closing the door. Where was I? So there are arguably dozens of building blocks of democracy, but Gessen homes in on two in her book. One is the free, robust, and unfettered press, and the powerful authority of the moral voice is the other one, and that'll be our topic at the end of the month. So in the readings from this book I'm sharing today, Gessen critiques how ours and the press's response to President Trump's antics has only served to normalize Trump's reality and hence a constant state of cognitive dissonance that wears us down, which is exactly what he wants. And not to worry, the service today will not entirely smack of punditry. There will indeed be a real prayer and a real sermon to follow. So, to begin. In the spring of 2017, in his word salad way, Trump was clear about why he fired James Comey. It was to quash the Russia investigation. When I decided to just do it, I said to myself, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won. So everybody was thinking they should have won the election. This was an excuse for having lost an election. Trump confirmed what everyone had known all along, but the media were not allowed to say until the president said it. He was demonstrating the power to say what he wanted, when he wanted, and the power to force the media to cover the story they were fed. Trump reversed himself also on the coronavirus repeatedly. He dismissed the threat and later asserted that he felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. He promised to reopen the economy, then changed his mind. He used his extraordinary power to create an ever-shifting reality, to keep the country riveted. Americans had no choice but to pay constant attention. So much in our lives depended on words that meant so little to the man who said them. Trump demands that the media recognize his domain over reality. He has captured the term fake news. He says, the press, the public doesn't believe you people anymore. Now, maybe I had something to do with that, I don't know, but they don't believe you. He's saying that he has given the American people a choice between two realities, and they have chosen his. Are you going to believe your own eyes or the headlines? This is the dilemma of people who live in totalitarian societies. Trusting one's own perceptions is a lonely lot. Believing one's own eyes and being vocal about it is dangerous. Believing the propaganda, or rather accepting the propaganda as one's reality, carries the promise of a less anxious existence in harmony with the majority of one's fellow citizens. The path to peace of mind lies in giving one's mind over to the regime. Bizarrely, the experience of living in the United States during the Trump presidency reproduces this dilemma. Being an engaged citizen of Trump's America means living in a constant state of cognitive tension. One cannot put the president and his lies out of one's mind because he is the president. Accepting that the president continuously tweets or says things that are not true are known are known not to be true, are intended to be heard or read as power lies and will continue to be broadcast on Twitter and by the media after they have been repeatedly disproven, means accepting a constant challenge to fact-based reality. In effect, it means that the two realities, Trumpian and fact-based, come to exist side by side on equal ground. The tension is draining. The need to pay constant attention to the lies is exhausting. And it is compounded by the feeling of helplessness in the face of the ridiculous and repeated lies. Most Americans in the age of Trump are not, like the subjects of a totalitarian regime, subjected to state terror. But even before the coronavirus, they were subjected to constant, sometimes debilitating anxiety. One way out of that anxiety is to relieve the mind of stress by accepting Trumpian reality. Another, and this too is an option often exercised by people living under totalitarianism, is to stop paying attention, disengage, and retreat to one's private sphere. Both approaches are victories for Trump in his attack on politics. So ends our first reading. At the center of our service and the center of our lives, let us take a breath now. Bear witness to what's in the center of our hearts. It's time for our weekly ritual of sharing our joys and sorrows. I encourage you to light a candle at this time and or type your joy, sorrow, a memory, or a hope into the chat. Please precede it with J and S so our reader knows what is to be read aloud. And today it's Joyce Fiddler.
When a sorrow is shared, it is lessened, and when a joy is shared, it is multiplied. In that spirit, I'm Joyce Fiddler, and I'm remembering my friend Jane Ryan, who died suddenly yesterday. May she rest in peace. A joy from Terry Hassman Paulin. Gene celebrated his 77th birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Gene. A joy and a sorrow from Katie and Ethan. A joy amidst so much sorrow this week is that the buildings at our beloved UU Camp de Benneville Pines were saved from burning down in the El Dorado fire. So grateful for the hard work by camp staff and the amazing firefighters who kept the enormous fire at bay. A joy and sorrow from Bonnie Burrows, both a joy and sorrow that she has moved Clara into off-campus housing yesterday at UC San Diego. She'll be in online classes while living safely with 3 of her third-year peers. She misses her already. From Reverend Hannah, remembering our dear Donna Mae Pitluck today, who died nearly a year ago on October 6th. I miss her so much. I'm going to take this as a joy from Diane Rowland, Karma Plus Science. From Jim Wallace, not sure whether this is a joy or a sorrow. Our youngest turns 20 today. We are out of the teenage years. We'll end with the lighting of a candle in honor of all those joys and sorrows people have decided to hold in the silent sanctuary of their hearts.
I invite you all to join me in a spirit of prayer, which will be followed by a full minute of meditation and our responsive hymn, which is From All the Fret and Fever of the Day. Last week for Yom Kippur, we heard the sage advice of the rabbi say that even with our worst enemies, we must take the higher road and wish them well. Let the anger of the past year fall away and wish them a clean slate as well. And so it is when our least favorite commander-in-chief falls ill, we wish him and his family, his staff, a speedy recovery. For in the end, we are all flesh and blood, brothers and sisters who yearn for the same things: love from our mothers, health, safety, and peace of mind for ourselves and our loved ones, the respect of our fellows. In other words, we all want to be saved from the things that can go wrong in life. Like the Jewish New Year, our universalist heritage of universalist salvation offers this no questions asked chance to begin anew as well. In its original and purest form, universal salvation offers the love of God to us all, no matter who we are or the terrible mistakes we have made. And so we pray for all the world's health and the health of all world leaders, that we may all reach the promised land where hand in hand, with the viciousness of the past fallen away, we may solve the world's problems together, face these enormous challenges together, so that the dignity and freedom of our democratic ideals may be shared equally across the land, including the creatures of our planet Earth, that they may not suffer in the oceans or the forests, but be considered and allowed to live and thrive as well. Amen. And now let us enter a full minute of communal silence.
let there be moments when we turn away, and deaf to all confusing outer din, intently listen for the voice within. In quietness and solitude we find the soundless wisdom of the deeper mind. With clear harmonious purpose let us then bring richer meaning to the world again.
It's time for our weekly ritual of sharing our financial gifts. Now more than ever, we are relying on the commitment and generosity of our members and friends. So we thank you very much for supporting the ministry and programs of our congregation, programs that offer connection, inspiration, and hope, these things that are needed more than ever. I encourage you to invite your family and friends to attend our worship services just a click away so we can share these gifts more widely. The offering will now be gratefully received. We're continuing with the Masha Gesem. Trump repeats his false statements after they have been fact-checked by the media and, in many cases, contradicted by officials in his own administration. And it is this repetition that gives Trumpian lies much of their power. A journalist who assumes that Trump's intention is unknowable, that repeated false statements, when the truth is indeed knowable, do not factually constitute lying, is abdicating the responsibility to tell the story, to provide the context of what happened a year ago, yesterday, or even in parallel with the lying. The journalist becomes complicit in creating the bizarre sense of ahistoricism of the Trump era, which seems to exist only ever in the current moment. NPR and many other media outlets practice the same self-enforced amnesia in a recurrent argument about whether to call Trump a racist, or even whether to call his statements racist. It took NPR until July 2019 to apply the word racist to a Trump uttering. The network took this step after Trump tweeted that 4 Democratic Congress members, all of them women of color, should go back to where they came from. NPR's public editor, Elizabeth Jensen, stressed, to be clear, NPR used the word racist to describe the tweets, not the man who wrote them. The dichotomy characteristic of virtually all media discussions of Trump creates 2 counterintuitive assumptions: that a person can systematically say racist things, but still not be a racist, and that there is a meaningful distinction between making racist statements and being a racist. This is a dichotomy reserved for behavior that society claims to condemn, but in fact tolerates. Behavior that may not sully the actor's reputation. One cannot steal and not be a thief. Commit murder, but not be a murderer. Drive drunk and not be a drunk driver. But one can establish a pattern of racist statements over decades and still not be a racist. Reluctance to label the statements themselves racist suggested that the judgment of whether a statement was racist or not was far more complicated than most people experienced it as being. This, in turn, reinforced the Trumpian sense of mushy reality, the growing feeling that nothing was knowable. The shared reality of many Americans is that they are hearing the president engage in racist speech. When journalists refuse to affirm this shared reality, it thins even more. If Trump's tweets and bizarre pronouncements make policy, then policy is Trump's tweets and bizarre pronouncements. As the Trump presidency marches on to the rhythm of near daily Twitter rants, daily outrages, and weekly embarrassments, it remains unimaginable, even if it is observable. To think that a madman could be running the world's most powerful country, to think that the commander-in-chief would use Twitter to mouth off about whose nuclear button is bigger, or to call himself a very stable genius, verges on the impossible. This can't be happening. This is happening. The thought pattern of nightmares and real-life disasters has become the constant routine of tens of millions of people. Every Trump tweet, televised statement, and headline causes a form of this reaction. If the word unthinkable had a literal meaning, this would be it. Thinking about it makes the mind misfire. It makes one want to stop thinking. So ends our second reading. And before we show our musical offering for the day, please be forewarned, there are some sexualized images. So for our parents and children, some viewer discretion may be advised. Chesney with noise. So in my readings earlier, you heard enough secular sounding stuff, which is not why you come to church, I know. So to cut to the chase, this other slim volume that I recommend reading, Ghosting the News by Margaret Sullivan, makes these 3 points. 1, local newspapers are failing precipitously, and what is becoming known as news deserts are proliferating in less populated areas of America and around the world. 2, this corrodes democracy in every way imaginable, such as a drastic reduction in civic participation, but especially because it means ruling, corruption, because no one is scrutinizing it or calling it out, is also proliferating like so many mushrooms in a dank and rotting ravine. So you get the point. Here now is the deeper spiritual underpinning of why I'm talking about this today and why I find it a vital topic for your consideration in terms of your evolutionary development and fitness. Since the beginning of time, human beings have been trying to communicate with one another and essentially tell each other their stories. When we got better and better at it, we found our commonalities, and by the grace of found and applied wisdom, we could at times flourish together. But living on a planet with finite resources and ruled by nature, we often found that our stories had the same goals with which we had to compete. We never lost our instincts to survive, And in short, it became a series of variations on a theme of violence and war. The need to compete time and again brought the worst of our human nature out. Not only did we hit each other with brute force, we also learned to be mentally cunning and learned the arts of deception, theft, and plunder. We then learned how to do violence and harm to one another without weapons or raising our hands. We learned how to do it with our minds, culture, and ruling power. The catch-all term for it might be corruption. But thankfully, we also learned how to counter these tendencies. In fact, with our minds, instead of fashioning mental weapons, we developed another art, the art of truth, of art itself, of the real story itself, what really happened, the context it happened in, and the ability to mass produce the medium in which it was relayed, the written word, the journalistic story, the news. This allowed people to make up their own minds about what really happened, what is really going on, and what one might do about it. It's a reflection of one of Unitarianism's earliest influences from Europe, something called Armanism, which is the belief that rather than being born a sinful creature, we are born blank slates, equal to one another, all of us bound in commonality by being born with a mixed bag of traits, both positive and destructive. And it was up to each of us and society to develop their potential in either direction, to ideally develop the productive traits to gain mastery over the destructive ones. The journey of this objective asks something of society. It asks for a fair playing ground where all humans have to play by and respect the same rules. This is the ideal humans have been striving for, dreaming of since the beginning of our existence. Sadly, the internal and external stimuli of a human life have often resulted in the manifestation of our baser qualities, fear, violence, and greed. And so, time and again, we have done our best to cooperatively create societies that have safeguards against these baser qualities, running all of humanity amok. The United States of America, incredibly flawed as it's always been, is one such attempt. One of its shining institutions has always been the free press, a way to share information that is accurate, factual, and dignified in its earnest attempt to deliver the truth so that the receiver can make of it what she or he will, much like Armanism. Thou may or thou may not. The Hebrew word is timshel. Thou may or thou may not seek the real truth so that you may edify the soul in a sincere attempt to know what the best action to take in any given situation might be. Information, knowledge, is not only a cornerstone of democracy, it is a cornerstone of developing, evolving the soul on an upward trajectory of integrity that we might inspire others to do the same and encourage them on their way as a way of giving back for the gift of our lives. America has never been perfect, and it never will be, for we are human made, and humans, as I have explained, are always born at least half flawed. But one of the best things we did is perfect the art of journalism, the local beat, reporting day-to-day occurrences that, if placed in their true context, manage to capture the imagination of their consumers, much as the Bible did when it too was once hot off the presses and still is. Our liberal religion, Unitarian Universalism, is a son of the Enlightenment, and journalism is its daughter. In their banter as brother and sister, they pummel, they fight, but before mealtime, they wash their hands of it and sit down to the common meal, which is a democratic society. Part of the worth and dignity of every human being is the right to be heard out, as well as the right to speak our truth. At the dinner table, we can discuss it in a civilized manner, see where we agree and don't agree. Then, like a Roosevelt-led Congress, figure out the best way forward with compromises, wins and losses on both sides. But by the time dessert is served, a sense of satisfaction shared by all that the job was hard but well done, and the common good would be cared for, served, and treated with decency, compassion, and above all, respect. And so, my friends, this is why a robust press matters, and why we should think about each of our roles in safeguarding it, for we each have a role. Whether it's simply subscribing to all our public journalism outlets, not just NPR, but especially your local rag, which should be so lucky to still be in business. In my case, it's the Pasadena Star News. For all of us, the LA Times, which was miraculously championed only a few short years ago by the good guys. Democracy Now!, a national podcast news outlet, is always a safe bet. But let's say you don't have a dime to spare, and many of us don't in pandemica. So write letters or copy, yes, even a small finished article about something factual or an op-ed to your local newspaper. In other words, be a volunteer amateur reporter. Margaret Sullivan in Ghosting the News has a half dozen stories of how ordinary citizens, like volunteer firefighters, decided to invest in local journalistic outlets, all for the sake of an educated populace, giving them the wielding tools to build the city on the hill. As quoted by Bill Moyers earlier, a democracy that changed the lives of neglected and despised masses of common laboring people. This isn't about privileged do-gooders helping the oppressed. It's about recognizing our common oppression as human beings and living each other up and out of a BS-induced hell together. So, read the news, damn it. Listen to it. I don't watch it myself. There's too many wily things and all those violent images and emotional manipulations that develop my more dreadful tendencies, and I refuse/reject that. I like what information does to my brain, unadulterated by the tainted enumerations of capitalistic entertainment. I like to hear real life people speaking. I like to read their words because I know how they are written is as close to how they meant to say it, therefore closer to the truth. If, of course, it's not the National Enquirer or the like, although such brain candy can serve its own purpose at times. Check your sources like you check your spiritual fodder inspirations. I trust Amy Goodman. I trust all the greats that were born out of the likes of Bill Moyers and his ilk. I also trust the likes of merry pranksters like Hunter S. Thompson, and certainly the journalists of Rolling Stone of yore. If you don't like the fact that your favorite periodical has croaked or is a lobotomized version of what it once was, just like Rolling Stone now, then start a new one or make a plan to disseminate an important story in some way. Every little bit counts. When I was a senior in college, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, I was a 1995 version of a merry prankster in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And rather than share what this culminated in, I will only share a mere signpost along the way. It, of course, was inspired by Hunter S. Thompson prankstering. I started an underground newspaper, the breaking issue of which featured local graffiti, a cover story about the horrible things happening in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, fart jokes, and was titled The Underdog. Perhaps if we had gone with one of our different title ideas, one notably the cornhole, we might have really made a go of it. But I graduated, my second edition was a mere ghost of its first, and the millionth print publication in the history of the world went the route, like so many lives of a species do, in the by and by. But the experience of it lives with me. It made me a lifelong lover of the printed word. And not merely the printed word, but the printed word printed in truth and dignity and respect to its receivers. The spoken word uttered in truth to its consumers. Because of my fancy higher education, I learned the lifelong gift of critical thinking, possibly only because of the journalistic ideals our democracy was founded on. Extremely imperfect, as we all know, it sure as heck is. I hope you get my drift. Consume not just good news, God forbid, not just entertainment, but make sure you get plenty of comedy and satire in there, or according to Masha Gessen, you will never survive an autocratic society. Consume the news that upholds the highest standards of integrity and truth. Demand it. Beg for it if you have to. And if begging is not your style, then go out there and report the news yourself. Share your findings. Fact check. Do not stop until it is as accurate as you can make it. Just like with your soul. Do not stop until you have evolved yourself to the best of your ability, to a higher echelon of being, where eventually you forget about yourself and your selfish objectives and ambitions, and are only at the service of women, men, and children. Amen. And now let us conclude our service with our final hymn.
God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power. Crown thine ancient church's story, bring its bud to glorious flower. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. For the facing of this hour. Lo, the clouds of evil round us, hide thy brightness from our gaze. From the fears that long have bound us, free our hearts to faith and praise. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage.